Hello, welcome to Revenant Reads. I'm Vin, and this is my monthly wrap-up for May of 2021. So here I'm going to talk very briefly about the books that I finished in May of 2021. I'm not going to speak on these books extensively. All of them, unless I state otherwise, I have spoken of more thoroughly inside the installments of Fresh Red Kills, where I talk about my current reads. So I just want to go through these very quickly, and a lot of times these videos are kind of just to help me keep a running record of the things that I've been reading, and when I read them. So the first one that I finished, I began this in April, finished it in May, and that is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, a fantasy version of the Second Sino-Japanese War, first installment. And I had very mixed feelings about this. There were certainly some aspects that I liked. I thought that using the war, World War II as inspiration was interesting. But there are times where it felt very young adult, and then they would throw these very adult, dark, grim, dark things in. And some of the dialogue didn't always work for me. So I didn't dislike this necessarily, but it didn't capture my interest enough to really want to continue with the what is a trilogy to finish that out. But I'm glad I read it. And then I read The Haunted, One Family's Nightmare, the harrowing true story of demonic attack and intimidation by Robert Curran with Jack and Janet Smurl and Ed and Lorraine Warren. I've made known in past videos that I am not a fan of the Warrens. I do think that they were somewhere, or a mixture in between people who are overly credulous and, something more along the lines of con artists. I mostly was reading this as part of Maybe Midrash, which is a monthly reading challenge to, not monthly, but in the month of May, it is a reading challenge to read one fiction and one nonfiction book. You can read more, and I did read more, that deal with religion, and to speak seriously and intelligently about the topic. And that's what I did for this, because for me, the Warrens do represent a very religious strand in real life, true hauntings. I'm going to use kind of my air quotes for that. Whether or not they're true, you can decide for yourself. But they do seem to be a response to spiritualism, which was supposed to be much more of a non-denominational, scientific investigation into the afterlife, into spirits. And this is very much a religious take on it. They are guided by faith, and especially Catholicism, but really more pre-Second Vatican Catholicism. They like their traditional Catholicism in here quite a bit, and that's what they mostly use to battle demonic spirits. And no, I think that this is pretty much a load of bunk. I would not recommend it. This is more something that I read for my own interest and I guess you could say research. I do have a great interest in how ghosts and ghost stories are depicted in our culture, but I don't think that people should go seeking that out and reading it. I also finished reading What Dreams May Come by Richard Matheson, an author who I do like quite a bit. I had read I Am Legend of the Shrinking Man already. I had seen the film version of this. It came out in the 90s. And this was interesting. Michael K. Vaughan had called this a weird book, and I totally agree with it. There are moments of genuine inspiration. I also read this for Maybe Midrash, and Matheson claims that the only thing that's fictional in here are the characters, that the depictions of the afterlife are entirely accurate and in keeping with all the extensive research that he's done. He does have a very odd bibliography at the end of this, and also an introduction that's very unique for a novel. And there are parts that I like. I think that there are some really cool ideas in here, but it does get weighed down in some of those things that he thinks are nonfiction, and it starts to feel a little bit too instructional at times. So this is not one that I would highly recommend, but I do find it interesting and worth checking out if it sounds interesting to you. I think the favorite thing that I read this month, and this is also for Maybe Midrash, was Village Atheists, How America's Unbelievers Made Their Way in a Godly Nation by Leigh Schmidt, and this is from Princeton University Press. This is one that I do plan to make a video about on its own, probably by the end of the month, hopefully I will have that. And really looks at 19th century non-believers and what it was like for them in the United States. And there's a lengthy epilogue that looks at court victories for non-believers, and really, that help to establish more solidly the separation of church and state inside the United States. I was expecting something more along the lines of quotidian experiences of non-believers, and that's not quite what we get here. It's more like profiling a couple of lesser-known non-believers, not just like Robert Ingersoll. And each chapter does have some very rewarding things, and there are extensive images of especially one cartoonist throughout here that were great to see. Very nicely printed. But yeah, I thought this was a very good book, very well written too. So yeah, this is definitely the best thing that I read this month, Village Atheists. I did also take part in the read-along that Matthew over at Mayberry Book Club and Steve Donahue did of The Dark Knight Rises by Frank Miller, the very influential four-part series of Batman as this old man, sort of old man, he's in his 50s, kind of coming back to the cape and cowl, and really interesting ideas, but this is not a terrific depiction of Batman or Superman for that matter. Very complicated. Batman comes off as a little more of somebody who relies more on luck and just beating people with his fists than actually the world's greatest detective. Glad I read it, but not as great of a Batman story as I think it's made out to be. And the last thing that I read, I finished this on May 31st, I believe, and that is William Peter Blatty's Legion, his sequel to The Exorcist, which I actually really like. This I did not like as much. It was at times boring and frustrating, especially in the first half when we have our main character, Detective Kinderman, going on these long diatribes about proof of God, etc., and difficult to find how it all actually relates to the plot. And then when the plot does get kicking, there are some moments in there, but ultimately not entirely satisfying the way everything plays out. So didn't hate this book at all. I'm glad I read it, but Blatty's film version is a much better version of this story. So pretty good reading month, quite a bit. This one time, I'll show the stack. So I read The Poppy War, the first book, The Haunted, Village Atheists, The Dark Knight Returns, William Peter Blatty's Legion, and What Dreams May Come by Richard Matheson. And so, not a bad month. All right. Thank you, BookTube.